Throughout the centuries, 3 times the coffin of the Swedish King Charles XII was opened, and what was discovered the first time was shocking and horrific. When the king's coffin was opened, the skull was analysed and discovered was a huge hole, showing that Charles XII had a terrible death and demise. The fatal shot had gone straight through his skull, brain, and come out the other side with a lead ball, causing a huge amount of damage. There was absolutely no chance that he survived that sort of wound at the time. As a king of Sweden, Charles XII was a skilled military leader, and he commanded troops that fought against their enemies who were much larger. He also introduced different changes and reforms to the country, but he never married and he had no children. With his death at the age of 36 on the battlefield being very unexpected. But what else was found when the coffin of King Charles XII was disturbed? And to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Charles XII was born on June 17, 1682, in Stockholm to King Charles XI and Queen Ulrika Eleonora of Denmark. His father, a capable and stern ruler, had strengthened Sweden's monarchy and its military during his reign. Charles XII was raised in an environment that valued discipline, loyalty, and martial prowess. From a young age, he showed an aptitude for physical challenges. He was known for his horsemanship, fencing skills, and intellectual abilities, especially in mathematics and languages. When Charles XI died in the April of 1697, the 15-year-old Charles XII inherited the Swedish throne. And despite his youth, the Swedish Riksdag, the parliament, declared him of legal age to rule, and he quickly gained a reputation for his strong will and determination. His early years as king were relatively peaceful, but the calm did not last long. Sweden's neighbours saw an opportunity to strike at a young and inexperienced monarch. The Great Northern War, from 1700 to 1721, pitted Sweden against the powerful Denmark-Norway, Saxony, Poland, and Russia, led by the ambitious young Tsar Peter I, later Peter the Great. In 1700, this alliance launched a coordinated attack on Swedish territories, hoping to dismantle Sweden's dominance in the Baltic region. Instead of faltering, Charles II demonstrated a remarkable ability to lead and inspire his armies. At the age of 18, he personally led Swedish forces against Denmark, forcing King Frederick IV to withdraw from the war in just a few months. He then turned his attention to Russia. One of Charles XII's most famous victories came from the Battle of Navarre on November 30th, 1700. Facing a Russian army of nearly 40,000 men, Charles commanded only about 10,000 Swedish soldiers, despite being outnumbered 4-1. Charles launched a daring assault during a blizzard. The well-disciplined Swedish infantry and cavalry, combined with Charles' aggressive strategy, routed the Russian forces, inflicting massive casualties. The victory at Navarre not only stunned Europe, but also cemented Charles XII's reputation as a military genius. However, rather than marching on Moscow to finish off Russia, Charles turned south to confront Augustus II, the Elector of Saxony and King of Poland, who posed an immediate threat to Swedish-controlled territories. Charles II spent the next several years fighting in Poland and Saxony. His goal was to remove Augustus II from the Polish throne and replace him with a Swedish ally. Through a series of victories, including the Battle of Klitzkow in 1702, Charles systematically defeated Augustus's forces. By 1706, he had installed Lesenski as king in Poland, achieving his objectives in the region. This period highlighted Charles's relentless pursuit of his enemies. He led his troops with an almost ascetic lifestyle, wearing simple clothing, sleeping on the ground, and sharing the hardships of his soldiers. His personal courage on the battlefield inspired intense loyalty, but this single-minded focus on war also strained Sweden's resources. With Poland subdued, Charles XII turned once more to Russia. In 1708, He launched a massive invasion, leading an army of around 40,000 men deep into Russian territory. However, this campaign would prove to be his undoing. Tsar Peter the Great had reformed and modernized the Russian army since the defeat of Navarre. Using scorched earth tactics, Peter avoided direct confrontation, instead burned villages and supplies, leaving the Swedish army to starve during the brutal winter of 1708 to 1709. By the time Charles reached Ukraine, his forces had been reduced to fewer than 20,000 exhausted men. The decisive moment came at the Battle of Poltava on June 27, 1709. Charles XII, wounded just days before the battle, could not personally lead his troops. The Russians, numbering over 40,000, decisively defeated the Swedish army. Thousands of Swedes were killed or captured, and Charles was forced to flee south to the Ottoman Empire. Poltava marked the end of Sweden's dominance as a major military power. Charles XII spent 5 years in exile in the Ottoman Empire, residing in Bender, modern-day Moldova, and he attempted to persuade the Ottomans to launch a campaign against Russia, but his efforts achieved little. In 1714, Charles returned to Sweden, riding on horseback across Europe in a legendary 14-day journey covering more than 2,000 kilometres. Upon his return, Charles found his kingdom in a dire situation. Sweden was under attack on multiple fronts, and his economy was strained from years of war. Yet the warrior king refused to negotiate peace. Instead, he planned new campaigns, hoping to turn the tide once more. In 1716 and 1718, Charles XII launched invasions of Norway, which were under Danish rule. It was during the second invasion, in the November of 1718, that Charles met his end. On November 30th, while inspecting trenches during the siege of the fortress of Fredriksten, he was struck in the head by a bullet and killed instantly. He was 36 years old. Now, in the following years after his death, Charles XII's coffin and burial vault have been opened a number of times. It was opened in 1746, 1859 and 1917. On each of these occasions, the coffin was opened to try and piece together his final moments and to work out where the shot came from that killed the king, as there had been a debate as to whether he was assassinated by his own men and or soldiers. When the coffin was opened each time, what was found was shocking. It was evident the king had a relatively instant death due to the significant injury to his skull. A shot or projectile had entered one side of the king's head and gone straight through to the other side. Also inside the coffin, the skull places such as his nose and mouth, and there was also some hair on the back of the head, and also the ears were visible. In 1859, it was concluded that the wound was from a shot from a Norwegian fort, but then in 1917, it was documented after X-ray that the skull that was the mortal wound was consistent by being hit by a bullet with a speed not higher than 150 metres a second. This meant that it was possible that the king was hit by an iron grape shot and killed. This devastating wound would have killed him instantly without a doubt. King Charles XII was one of the most enigmatic monarchs in history. He was a skilled military leader and commander, and was completely fearless. He had a simple way of life and rejected court extravagance, but was devoted to the military. He was a warrior king, but on the battlefield, on the 30th of November 1718, at the age of 36, he was struck by a shot which went straight through his skull, through his brain and out the other side. Opening the coffin of Charles XII showed the brutality of his final moments on this earth. Thank you for watching, and to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. And again, thank you so much for watching.